for Raymond, titled Ernesto.
Ernesto was a student in my intermediate English as a second language class. He had a lanky, elegant demeanor and, unlike all of the other students, always wore a suit and tie to class. He did every homework assignment and sometimes, annoyingly, went ahead in the books, so when I gave those assignments, he would chuckle and wave dismissively. I've already done that. His English was all right, not great. Though he had been in the country for years, it sometimes seems he hadn't listened to the language around him, but instead concocted his own private grammar. I don't will go, you don't will go, he don't will go. It's I won't go, I told him. You won't go? He won't go? Really, he said. He seemed quizzical, maybe a bit shocked. It's not, no, I told him formally. His determination distinguished him from the other students. While they teased and joked around during the break, eating takeout Chinese from white cartons, he kept on reading in English. In the school library, he found a dated collection of unusual facts he was fond of. He worked as a waiter, and when people left a book at the restaurant, after the required interval, he sometimes claimed it. One was called charisma, and we talked about that, what it meant. And its adjective, charismatic. This was in the spring before we thought to apply that word to Trump. Though the women in their hijabs would flutter like pigeons whenever Trump was mentioned. He's a very bad man. He wants to send us back to Morocco. Another day, Ernesto showed up with the life of Hitler, and on yet another with a compendium of famous assassins. Ernesto was from a small village in El Salvador. And by a strange coincidence, Javier, another student in the class, was from that same town. Javier was totally the opposite of Ernesto. He was short, plump, and jovial, with sleek black hair and laughing eyes. His English was terrible, but somehow he could explain anything, using lots of gestures. Javier was gay, and he had a boyfriend. And on weekends, he'd go partying together. Ernesto would go salsa dancing. Sometimes, he told me, he would ask women to dance, and sometimes he would just watch, eyeing women who attracted him. He always went home alone. One time, early on, when I had just started teaching, Javier had just come back from Salvador, and he and Ernesto spoke in Spanish about it. I asked him what they were saying, and Ernesto told me Javier was telling him something about what was going on in the town. Javier could go back because he had a green card. Because he was gay, he had applied for and gotten asylum. But Ernesto could never leave because he wouldn't be able to come back. That's how I learned he was undocumented. Javier told all about how he had come over as a young man, not speaking much English, how he had found his way in different youth centers and immigrants' right groups in Texas, near the border, and how everyone had helped him. He was so glossy and cheerful. You could see why people would have wanted to help. Ernesto could never tell his story, never say how he arrived. Javier showed me a picture on his cell phone. It was his family's house in El Salvador. Simple white house. 3 sides of it were visible. And in front of each side was what seemed like a figure lying down. They shot them, Javier said. They seemed to know when I was coming back. They'll do something. We had a young woman volunteer who knew about gangs in El Salvador. They were founded by criminals in the US. Immigration found them, sent them back, and then they kept on doing the criminal things they had been doing in the US in El Salvador. She showed a short video about the gangs. She wanted to show a full-length documentary about them, but Ernesto said, no, I lived through that. I don't need to watch it. He had wanted to become a doctor. He is always talking about health, what you should eat, what you should wear, the right kind of exercise. His best friend growing up in El Salvador had actually become a doctor training in Cuba. But Ernesto's family was poor. He had to start working after 6th grade. I found him a short, affordable training program in the medical interpreting, which I thought he would be great at. But my supervisor said that even if he could get into the program and complete it, he probably wouldn't be able to get a job doing it without papers. I think about the limitations, what they are now, and how much tighter they could become. When I left that job, I asked Ernesto for an email or a phone number where I could contact him. I was thinking of getting rid of some books, and I thought maybe he could use them, but he refused. He said he changed his phone number and email every couple of months. He said he saw people in his neighborhood here whom he had known in El Salvador, but they'd been on the wrong side, the side of the gangs. We just walk by, he said. We never speak. Ernesto, where can we hide you? So solid, so serious, asking me questions from your book of unusual facts. What was the first state to give the women the vote? What was the next state after the original 13? Ernesto, that's not your name. I've changed everything. Ernesto, Eduardo, Carlos. They won't find you in this speech. I changed everything, except Javier's photo on his cell phone. The bodies lying down like they're taking a nap, like straw men cut down from a tree. That was real. And the names of the books? Though perhaps I have changed them too.